Hello, everyone. A good evening and welcome to Pass the Noise, the podcast where we just have an open forum discussion where your input is encouraged and welcome. We hope that you'll join in, whether you put something in the comments or use the call-in link, which I'll be providing shortly to just make your thoughts and feelings known. This is not a echo chamber. If you disagree, you disagree. If you agree, you agree. But we would love to hear your thoughts on the topics we have on tap for tonight. I am your co-host, Elder Michael Hightower, joined as always by my co-host, Apostle T.B. Walker.
Hi, everybody.
Good to see you tonight.
Good to see you too, Elder.
Yeah,
Looking forward to tonight.
Yeah. So I'm excited about the topics. We have multiple topics on tap for tonight, and they sort of all flow to the last topic we're going to discuss. But I think they're all interesting in their own way, and they sort of bring to light some of the things that we have been talking about since we started this podcast a couple of months ago. So I think it's going to be really good. Again, we thank everyone for joining. If you listen to this later on our Facebook or YouTube page, you can just go to either of those platforms, do a search for Pass the Noise, and you'll find us there. You can watch all of our past episodes. You can still make comments and on those either of those platforms, and we will respond because we just love to keep the conversation going. The issues we're discussing are not just like, we're just discussing. As you're going to see tonight, it's not just we discuss them and it just goes away. It's like these are issues that are continuing to affect us and our society. So just looking forward to a great discussion tonight, as always.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's just jump into the first topic, which is NFL and concussions. Now, we discussed last week how we felt like the NFL was sort of dropping the ball in terms of player safety, ignoring the things that are right in front of their face. We went through the whole, 10 years ago, the doctor discovered CTE. And so the NFL hasn't really proven that they actually care about player safety. You still have the same issues with head trauma. And we talked about the Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua, who suffered an obvious concussion, was allowed to play again, and then the next week suffered an even more serious concussion where his fingers and arms were frozen up. It was crazy, and it just really felt like the NFL wasn't doing their part. And everyone has a part: the players, the coaches, and the owners. Everyone has a part in protecting the players to a certain degree. But this week, it seemed like they went all the other way. So we had a player who somebody thought may have suffered a concussion. There was no obvious trauma. He passed the test, and they sort of let him back in the game. And this happened across the NFL, across multiple teams, where now they're like way on the side of caution. But it really just shows really not that they care, but that they don't care. Because one, these things could have been put in place from the beginning, and secondly, the things they're doing now are just public pressure. Like if it wasn't on TV and people hadn't seen, this Tua freeze up, you wouldn't have these. So it's still back to the same issue. Whereas I believe if players and the people who represent them don't stand up for themselves, then they can forget about the league's not going to stand up for them. I don't
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're owners, so they in some ways it's the relationship is actually right out there. The fact that that the players are a commodity, and I think as time has gone on, the players obviously have recognized over time their value, their worth to an extent. But you're right. Unless the players stand up, and we get a glimpse of what pressure is like on the NFL. If that pressure is actually really levied, and the people can levy the kind of public pressure greater than anyone are the players. So they really need to really look at this as a real pivotal moment where they can really begin to see their real power here.
I think the irony is that back in the day, even when we were young, players would often do something else to earn a living during their offseason. Sure. They weren't making enough playing to just play and just do nothing else.
Right.
I think in some ways the money almost is pressure itself to keep playing. Like, I'm making so much money, there's so much money on the line that they're thinking about the money and not their long-term health. What do you think about that?
Sure. I don't know if I would call it pressure.
Okay.
If I would, more incentive.
Okay.
Because they're not pushed to make an additional. Tom Brady's looking at coming back at the, maybe if his marriage goes sour, and his kids, and he doesn't get to see the kids. He made a promise to Giselle. What when you look at the money that's out there, the ability to they keep that fame going. I think that connection is this soup. That's the real elixir. You know, and I think again, when you look at it, money is really there, right? But these guys are multimillionaires. They can really afford to retire in their third, fourth year if they wanted to, right? The reality is this is a culture of fame.
Okay.
You know, it's the name. It's boxers who have come back, you know, after, you know, at 40 years old. Why? Because they need the cash? Or was this about the limelight? And the limelight is so much larger and so much bigger than it was before because it's so international in a way that it was not before. It was really regional. You know, you could have a quarterback that was, you know, that was well known in the region, you know, and that was not well known out west, but could be well known in the east. This now is people known in foreign countries far and wide. And that's a hard thing to walk away from. And I think the owners are leveraging some of the idea of the fame. And that's what's keeping football players, you know, doing things they know that are going to be harmful to them. But it's not just the cash, because they've got enough cash. You know, got enough guaranteed money to simply say, forget that. What would make them continue? Man, it's something about people saying, hey, sign this piece of paper with your name on it. I think that's the real elixir.
The other part, no, that's true. I mean, you do. I mean, even if you play on a smaller scale, you do miss game day, right? You miss
absolutely,
you know, walking out on the field or court or whatever it may be, and hearing the crowd and feeling the crowd's energy. I mean, you do miss that when you stop playing. So I can only imagine walking into a stadium with 80, 90,000 people. I can only imagine that would be like an adrenaline rush. Like that would almost be something you get addicted to.
Absolutely,
that feeling of wow, they're cheering for me, or just feeding off that. So I definitely can see how that would be something that would incentivize, or internally incentivize players to sort of do things that are against their long-term interests. So
absolutely, and look at how people respond to the big hits. Look how people respond to the guy who gets up from the big hit. Look, so I mean, our society is kind of based and built around the guy who takes a licking and keeps on ticking. He played with a broken thumb. I mean, Kobe, as good as he was, people really are now talking about it, but it's his toughness. Did you know he had 3 broken fingers and he still played? Did you know he had broken an elbow and he was still shooting with the left hand?
Right.
We didn't look and say, hey, that's crazy. No, people now are looking and saying, hey, that's another reason why I love this guy.
Yeah.
And if you watch this as a young player and you get to see, that's another reason why they love this guy. He slides head first. He was out, but he refused to go out another play. He just got his wind back and ran back in. Those are the things that commentators are saying. Now look at that. That guy's so tough. And young boys want that. And more than just the money, because you'll get that early enough.
Yeah. No, there is an element of I want to be tough. I want to be known as somebody who can take a big shot, and then I come right back. Just tape it up or whatever the case was, rub it down real quick, put some ice on it, and I'm back in the game. That's it's kind of
that's
crazy,
football, right? That's football. But isn't that really in our culture as well? Isn't that how we do our boys? We like the idea, like I mean, he takes a fall. We kind of looking like, okay, let's see how he's gonna react.
Right.
And like if he gets up, everybody says, that's a big boy, right? he gets the attaboy, right? I mean, he kind of learns that it's just like, and if he cries, people say, oh, come on now.
Yeah.
Right? So we kind of teach that whole thing. And athletes feed on that continual attaboy that comes from, hey, if that's your sister and she smashed her face on the floor, everybody jumps up from their seat and says, you okay? If it's a boy, we look and say, man, he sucked it up. He wanted to cry, but he didn't. We're all so proud of him. And that continues.
Yeah. We have a comment. Let's see. Clarice said it's called determination.
Okay.
There is an element of sports where you learn how to overcome adversity, and you learn how to manage things, and you learn how to push through. I think that the question becomes, when is it pushing through, and when is it like, no, this is crazy. Like there's a line there where it's like, I mean, you not really hurt or whatever, and you sort of press through and you learn like, if I push myself, I ran this last sprint and I thought I was going to keel over, but I didn't. I mean, I think there's value in that. But if and like I said, the line will be different for different people. But there is a line where now I'm getting to the point where I'm putting myself at risk, and that's what you don't want to do. So I think there is a line there. But yeah, part of playing sports is you got to have a certain level of determination because there's going to be discomfort. I mean, part of playing sports is getting in shape. It's uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable for sure.
Absolutely. And listen, to piggyback on that a little bit, I think that I think all of what we're doing though has to be defined or redefined. Because I mean, in some ways the sport and the league has hijacked what determination is from what might be the detrimental to your health, right? So once they hijack the definition, we kind of move along with it. That he plays hurt, that's a plus. He just won't go out any place. That's a plus, right? And so we start really looking and saying that's a plus when in some cases that's, playing hurt may not be the best thing. The idea of having a broken bone and in your sternum and still taking the hit anyway, because the league has applauded it and because the definition has now been tweaked, I'm not sure we don't need to go back and look and say, wait a minute, are we now calling crazy determination? Are we calling deadly determination?
Yeah.
This could have killed him, but it didn't.
Yeah.
Was that determination or was that way over the line?
Yeah, and unfortunately, because as a player, your head can get like all fogged up. Like you sometimes need somebody else to say, no,
right,
you're good, you're done. Because if you say I'm good, then people say, okay, he said he's good. Let's see, maybe another comment. Clearly said, oh, I should have said that was sarcasm. I remember when my son played and won a championship in high school. He never complained of symptoms during the season. I was livid. Yeah, that's different. See, that's not it is a form of determination, but that's over the line. That's a case where you're hiding injury, you're hiding persistent pain, and being a tough guy, toughing it out is like that's where that line is. That's determination, but it's counterproductive determination.
Personally.
Yeah.
Personally. Yeah. And again, it comes back down to, what's productive. As we look at these team sports, you are secondary, right? We kind of teach that early on. You're a part of it, but like you're secondary, it's about the team. Yeah. It's about winning. It's everything. And so that Newt Rockney and that mindset that, winning's not it's not, everything. It's the only thing, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like a great mantra, but it's not the only thing. Like my health is a thing that might supersede the game.
Yeah.
And we can forget, hey, life is not a game, but football is.
Right. Yeah.
And that gets twisted. And I think that's where we might be back at a place where we have to re-examine again. Wait a minute. Have the definitions been hijacked?
Yeah. To some extent. Yeah. To a certain extent, that's probably the case. But it's up to, and players and their families and people who care about them have to, sometimes, come to a conclusion that this is not. I've seen players where they said, I had enough. They retire early, or they're like, this is crazy. Like, I'm not going to do this. Like, I'm not going to maim myself for life, or I feel like I've had enough. So I think, some players will, some players won't, but it depends. It depends sometimes. See, Clarice said he just had to play. And then she says, with a concussion.
Yeah, that's serious.
Yeah. That's a whole nother thing, because any injury can be made worse by continuing to play on it, whether it's a sprained ankle or the tweaked elbow. But a concussion, I forget the numbers, but if you had one, the chance of you having another one like increased exponentially. So if you've had one, you're probably going to get another one soon. If you have another helmet to helmet hit, or your head hits the ground again, much easier to have a second one after you had the one. Like it is, it's much easier to sprain your ankle the second time after you sprain it once. Like if you have a sprained ankle that's been compromised, it's going to happen again.
Right. And you know, a lot of that, man, is so connected, I think, to the maleness in our society and the way we view males. Because you know, I don't believe that we would view women in the same way. I don't believe that we would look at women with concussions now, you know, and maybe we don't have sports like that, but I'm not sure if we would look at it, you know, because again, watching female boxing, you know, it's a blood sport, but I see the referees jumping in female boxing in a way that, and maybe that's because of time and they're, you know, they've grown as well. But I suspect that, you know, we would not, some of that may be connected to how we view little boys and how we view men, that there's a certain amount of, hey, it's only a finger. You know, hey, you just got your bell rung. You know, just get up and shake it off. In a way that if you saw a girl, you know, get her bell rung in that way, I don't think we look and say, hey, get up, shake it off. You know, I think we look and say, whoa, she's going to need some time off. You know, if you know, she gets kicked in the head in a soccer game, I don't think we look at it and say, hey, man, she needs to just get back in there. What's wrong with her?
I don't think we have the same standards for males and females when it comes to toughness in general, but certainly not in sports, for sure. It's a lot different.
Right.
So we have more comments. Willie May says, I agree with Apostle. This athletic abuse is not just with professional athletes. Parents are pushing their own children to play in pain. So who's going to stop parents?
Trauma.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, I think the only thing that will stop it is that, you know, the only thing that wakes us up is trauma. People will have to get hurt and hurt worse, you know, and you know, and some of what's going to happen with CTE that only happens, that you can only really know seriously until after death. I think there's going to be so much more that has to happen that people will eventually wake up and look and say, hey, now we can have a real serious discussion about what we need to do in terms of youth athletics and whether we need to move in this direction, you know, any longer. It's a great sport. And I mean, you know, on one hand, I'm saying that. On the other hand, I'm saying I really like football. But I think it's, you know, I'm a product of the society as well. We may have to relook at it and ask ourselves, is this gladiator sport for kids? And, you know, and if it's not for kids, I don't know, because you gotta have to start it really young in order to really, you know, perfect it. And like, do we need it? Are the injuries that are there and the potential for those injuries, are they worth it to the society? Because there's so many sports that people have stopped because of that very same thing. You know, it's one of the reasons why, you know, that, and I suspect that like bullfighting is not really, really huge here. And a lot of that's because of the bull. Right? I mean, right, a lot of that's because we care a little bit more about the bull than we do about the matador. So I'm not sure when you just think the thinking, we may have to rethink how we see sports. And that's going to really come, I think, as Pastor Hill said, it's really going to have to happen at a very grassroots parental level.
It's definitely, I mean, in youth sports, it's going to be the parents. I mean, oftentimes the parents are the spectators, the referees, the coaches. They're involved from soup to nuts. So they have their finger right there. And so, but there's a competitive thing. Like, I want my kid to excel. I want my kid to excel because he might lose the spot. And you have that same competitive pressure at lower levels that you do at higher levels, especially as you get up to the point where you're talking about making high school teams and competing for college scholarships and all that kind of stuff. The parents can get just as crazy. I mean, I've been in the stands and heard crazy parents. I mean, I heard parents, you know, say, you know, ignore the coach. You're telling the kid to do something different than what the coach tells them to do. So sometimes the parents are the worst, you know, the worst enemy to this whole thing. But yeah, the parents definitely, especially in youth sports, definitely bear a large responsibility in terms of what's going on with the health of their kids.
Absolutely.
So you have another comment. Kyrie says, do you think it's because we teach our boys that we have to be tough? Do you think it is along the lines of telling them that men don't cry?
I do. I think a lot of that is connected to it in terms of how we initially started, you know, because we're kind of socialized in that way. So, you know, boys crashing into each other and getting up and handling it is really a part of, it's a rite of passage. You know, when we see two boys fighting, you know, wrestling, if they throw their sister down halfway down the steps, you know, we are up in arms. If they throw each other halfway down the steps, you know, we look at the one and say, he's going to be the tough one. But, we may scold him a little bit, but we kind of still laud and applaud that area of toughness. And again, I think that may have to be redefined of what is tough, because we might be moving into silly, dangerous, calling tough dangerous, when we don't live in a world where we have to have, a sport where there's a potential for breaking your neck or having a concussion.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to think about redefining those terms and redefining toughness in terms of toughness, speaking up when you're hurt, speaking up.
Right, absolutely.
Speaking up when you're like, I can't go. And instead of being called, all sorts of names and you're, a punk and you're not this and all that kind of stuff, like, yo, that's smart. I mean, if you can't go, you can't go. But that is generally not this culture in sports. Like, oh, you can't go, okay. Pound the back and like, yeah, go ahead and sit down. That's generally not how that goes. So we'll see as this continues to move forward. We'll see what happens with youth football, because I hear a lot of players, even players who play in college and the pros, are saying, I'm not gonna let my kid. My kid's not gonna play. I'm not gonna let him play. It's like there's too much trauma involved in playing football that I'm not gonna let him do it. So we'll see. Jump into our next topic, which is transgender men and the Secret Service, Selective Service. So this is men who have transitioned from male to female. So it's actually transgender females. And the government has made it clear that these folks have to register for Selective Service. So let's take a look at this clip, and then actually, before we do that, we have another comment. So let's look at the comment, and then we'll look at the clip. Chavez says, parents oftentimes are not exhibiting the best judgment concerning their children in sports because they, too, are chasing the fame and big payday at the end. Many times, poverty has a lot to do with it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. For the parents who think, this is their way to get their kid out, or this is their way for their kid to achieve, is to go to college or achieve other goals that perhaps they might not otherwise be able to get to. Absolutely, the parents sometimes push the kids in ways that's just, it's not healthy. So there's definitely that issue as well.
And there's fame connected to being a parent of an athlete now.
100%.
When you think about it, 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't quite like that. But now with, commercials,
right.
Mom's in there cooking with the quarterback, and he's, somebody's throwing a pass and Mom's the only one who can catch it.
Right.
Listen, the mothers and fathers and, uncles can get famous now being connected. Patrick Mahomes' brother.
Yeah.
Is in people know his name, even though he may know his name for being somewhat of a jerk. People know his name. So, that wouldn't have happened before. Who knew Joe Namath's brother? Joe Namath's mom wasn't in the spotlight, but now they are. So I think that there's a great connection to the mom who used to be, part of the, the rah team, who's now really going to be on camera.
Yeah. On camera, on social media, all over the place. Absolutely. To your point. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's pull up this clip and we'll discuss it.
Biden administration, trans women must register for draft. Trans men don't have to. But the truth shows a White House championing transgender rights, but not living up to their own standards. It started with a tweet from the US Selective Service. In fact, you heard the speaker bring up the issue of the draft. A tweet came out a few days ago. Parents, if your son is an only son and the last male in your family to carry the family name, he is still required to register with the Selective Service. Learn more about who needs to register at the website. And because Twitter is a profoundly dumb place, a number of people responded, my son's now a girl, so we good. Or, for the purpose of the Selective Service, my son will identify as a girl starting with his 18th birthday. Checkmate fascist. Makes sense, right? The Biden administration believes people can be whatever they want.
To everyone celebrating Transgender Day of Visibility, I want you to know that your president sees you, and we're committed to advancing transgender equality in the classroom, on the playing field, at work, in our military, in our housing and healthcare systems, everywhere.
If we all have to recognize people's genders, why doesn't the government? Why doesn't the military? After all, this president never shied away from standing up for transgender people and trans rights. He never shied away from using it for political gain. If the president wants to stand up for trans rights, why not change the draft requirements? Why not stand up for trans rights when it matters, rather than just using it as a talking point?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Absolutely. I'm throwing the calling link in the comments in case someone wants to call in. Very interesting because there's talking about something, right? There's the sort of the rhetoric and like, I believe in this, I believe in that. And then there's the reality, push comes to shove. This is something's going to happen. And you have to really make a decision based on what you really think. And sometimes those things can be completely different, as we saw in that clip.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, I think it's in some ways the height of hypocrisy to actually come out, and say, hey, I'm all for it, only to show that in truth, in an area where you think it's important. Listen, you know what? I mean, live and let live, do whatever you want to do. All of those things are great when it doesn't count. Whether it's, you drink Kool-Aid, I don't like Kool-Aid. Live and let live, right? You know what? I mean, you want to get a Jeep and I want to get a compact. Live and let live. All of us are live and let live when it comes to stuff that doesn't matter. But when it comes down to things that matter, and one of the things that matters to the government is protection. It is defense. Isn't it interesting that all of a sudden these people that were, you are what you said you are, they aren't right there? I wonder why. And I think the government just hasn't gotten there yet where it has to admit that it was wrong. It'll never do it, but that's exactly what this says.
They just did it. They won't say the words, but they just did admit it. With the policy admits it. The policy basically says, I know that you say you're a woman, but you're really a man, and we need biological men to fight this war, right, on the front lines or whatever. So it's an acknowledgement that in terms of brute strength and all that stuff that you would use in, needing a fighting force, men are superior. So we'll pretend that you're a female when we're, pointing you to this thing or that thing. We'll pretend you're a female when you're this or that. But when it comes down when we need brute strength,
right,
we're going to stop. We're going to rip the mask off and stop pretending and say, you're really a guy and we need you here. I mean, that's just the bottom line. So they just said all the other stuff is just pandering.
Listen, all those people and all the trans people, especially who are about, equality. Listen, I'm making a clarion call for you now to just come out against this 100%. All of you that would be able to get out of the draft, who says you're now a man. Listen, please do me a favor. I want you to just come on, shout down Biden in Washington and say, hey, don't give me a pass. I'm really a woman or I'm really a man. Just go and shout the whole thing down. And because I think that you're not going to get a huge backlash here, even though this is a slap in the face. Right. It's a slap in the face even to the transgender community. I don't know how the government, I'm not sure how they view this announcement, but to me, it's also it's a slap in the face to the people they were simply supporting just a moment ago. They said you can be whoever you say you are. We have to agree with you, right? We're going to put signs up and you go to the bathroom you choose, right? That's a slap in the face to them.
Right.
Because they're actually saying, hey, listen, you're not a man. And hey, you with the dress on, I know who you really are. You're not a woman. Like I would think that the trans people would be up in arms about this.
You would think so, because what they're basing it on your birth certificate, not on what you say. They're saying we're dealing with reality. We're dealing with the real deal, what it really is. We're not listening to you. We're not looking up the other stuff. We don't care how much hormone therapy you've gone through. We don't care what surgery you had. Bottom line is there's only so much you can do to your body. You're still a man. Is good enough. Let's go. And it's not even about transgender in the military, because the Trump did ban transgenders from the military, but Biden
revoked it, right?
And there are resources in the military to help people who are transitioning. If you're in the military and transitioning, resources to help you. So this isn't about keeping transgender people out of the military. This is about an acknowledgement that men who are born men remain men, and women who are born women remain women. Because the other way, the transgender women who transition to men do not have to sign for this
Right.
service. They're like, yeah, we're good. We
Right.
know you're actually a female. We're not going to pretend and that you can drag a 200-pound man across the battlefield if he's injured. We're not going to pretend. We're not going to do that when lives on the line, when something's really important. If we're just playing around, then it's like, do what you want. We don't care. So it's revealing, to say the least.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and it's sort of both of those things sort of flow into our last topic for tonight, which is sort of, is America in decline? Like, are these things signaling to us that the U.S. as a, whatever you want to call it, a world power, an empire, are we on a downward slide compared to the rest of the world? I think it's a good question, especially what you've seen in the news lately with OPEC plus. The U.S. asked them to not pump less oil, and they're like, we're going to pump less oil. We're kind of going to do what we want. So it seems like the U.S. is losing influence around the world. That's what it seems like, is happening to me.
Absolutely. I mean, definitely. And, since, we haven't really been victorious in a conflict since World War II.
I guess.
If
you would call it, I guess that's victory. We came at the end and sort of batted cleanup, so to speak. But sure, yeah, that would be the last.
Yeah, but we left Vietnam and
that's an L.
Yeah, that was definitely an L. We took an L there. And then we fought these tribal people. We fought organizations, not even whole nations, but just organizations, and for years, and we left with our tails between our legs, leaving Afghanistan, without victory. So, our decline, I think, is definitely, you can definitely tell that the people of the world don't see us in the way they used to.
Yeah, and why would they?
Right.
Why would they? So let's look at a clip. This is a clip from a drama from a TV show, but it's really interesting, sort of the topic that they broached and the way that they approached it. So let's take a look at this clip, and then we'll come back and discuss it.
Can you say why America is the greatest country in the world?
Diversity and opportunity.
Lewis?
Freedom and freedom. So let's keep it that way.
Will?
The New York Jets.
No, I'm going to hold you to an answer on that. What makes America the greatest country in the world? Why is America
not the greatest country in the world, Professor? That's my answer. And with a straight face, you're going to tell students that America is so star-spangled awesome that we're the only ones in the world who have freedom? Canada has freedom. Japan has freedom. The UK, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, Australia, Belgium has freedom. So 207 sovereign states in the world, like 180 of them have freedom.
All right.
And yeah, you, sorority girl, just in case you accidentally wander into a voting booth one day, there's some things you should know. And one of them is, there is absolutely no evidence to support the statement that we're the greatest country in the world. We're 7th in literacy, 27th in math, 22nd in science, 49th in life expectancy, 178th in infant mortality, 3rd in median household income, number 4 in labor force, and number 4 in exports. We lead the world in only 3 categories: number of incarcerated citizens per capita, number of adults who believe angels are real, and defense spending, where we spend more than the next 26 countries combined, 25 of whom are allies.
Powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's from a TV show that I've actually never watched, but it's on HBO, or was. And even though it's a drama, those numbers were real, and the stats he quoted were real. And so it was interesting, though. The first 2 people who spoke sort of gave the knee-jerk reaction that people give when that, why is America so great? Well, we have freedom and we have these other things, as if we had them exclusively. And it was interesting that they went there in this clip, and then he was like, why do we think that we're the only ones that have these things? Like, why do we believe that it's exclusive to America? I think that's because I think somebody said, like, we're the greatest propagandists in the world, so people believe that that's sort of the case.
The propaganda machine in America is awesome, and it starts when we're kids. The indoctrination starts when we're young, and also, in terms of how we see the world, though we kind of see ourselves as these beacons of freedom, we really see America and American only broadcasting. We didn't, we really didn't see the world. So we saw everything through the prism of red, white, and blue. And so it's natural for college students to grow up through these systems that we have, the Star Spangled Banner system that we work under, that says we won every war, that our military is the greatest, that, when you think of the spelling bee, it's always, an American, though the truth, it has been in a long time that it hasn't been that way. Things have changed so much in our way, but our movies and our cinema have shown, the kid from New York, or the kid from Berkeley as a student at MIT, when truth, MIT, the student there who, wins the robotics contest, is not even from here. So much of what we have been taught is really the product of propaganda, which is why that student would actually, even though it's a fiction, why that student would say that, that we're the greatest country, and why everybody would immediately answer diversity as if we're the only ones that have it, because we are kind of taught that we are. Every American really is kind of made to think you're an ambassador to the world. We bring democracy everywhere we go. These other crazy countries, they know nothing about civilization. So we're kind of little mini ambassadors. And I think that's kind of how we grow up thinking. If you go to Africa, you're going to bring a little bit of civilization. If you go to Asia, you're going to bring a little bit of Western civilization to these backwards people.
Yeah. And it begs, the question she asked begs the question, not just is America great, but was it ever great? Was this country ever truly great in any sense of the word great?
I guess in a sense of how you judge countries, right? How you judge an empire. America would be up there with any great empire. I think when it comes down to it, America and what it's accomplished and what it's owned, and and its power in the world, sure, it's going to be ranked up there with the, probably nowhere near land ownership like the British Empire, or conquest like the Greek Empire. But in terms of this language being all over the world and Americana and the power that America holds, sure, there's a certain greatness that's there. But it's hidden greatness. It's based upon a definition that, again, America's been able to control. Because in terms of true greatness, in terms of we did it ourselves, that's kind of suspect when you look at our history.
Yeah, we have a comment I'm going to get to in a second. But if you look at how, you can't just jump forward, 200 years. If you look at how the country was founded, there's some not so great things. You're talking about racism. You're talking about taking the land of the indigenous people who were here, stealing stuff and resources and colonization. So you're talking about some stuff that's not so great, that sort of got to this, when we built this great country. But can you build a great country on the foundation of those things? I guess if you measure it by, gross domestic product and those kind of things, I guess the answer is yeah.
Sure. And I guess that, if you compare it to other countries, that's how Rome was built, right?
Right.
Rome had more slaves than,
yeah,
than any other city. So, it's how Rome was built. It's how Carthage was built. It's how Egypt was built, right? The Great Pyramids are probably built, in the same way. So, based upon the standards of how you judge a country, that would be great. I think America would be great. And in some ways, we saw the greatness of America in its past. I'm not sure we have that same greatness. And unfortunately, the mantra, make America great again, man, it's probably true, because I think the idea that, as the statistics showed, he said we're 7th here, we're 49th here, but we haven't always been. There was a time when we were number 1 in lots of those areas where we were actually the leader in many of those areas, and we've lost it. And I think the decline, just like a Roman Empire, was something that I don't think they were seeing as they were declining. I think we're in an empire decline that I think we don't see, because the propaganda machine in Rome was just in the same way. Everything Roman, though everything was moving away from Rome.
That is good.
The barbarians were at the gate.
Right. Absolutely. Let's get to this comment. Let's see. Chavez says, America is on decline in every way, militarily, religiously, morally, financially, socially, and the list goes on. It will continue to decline because we are divided. We used to have so much to disagree on, but we could unite as Americans. Sadly, that was the past. It's a new day.
Sure. It's a new day. Well, you know what? I mean, I think we still have a lot to disagree on. I'm not sure if that's changed. We are Americans.
Right.
That hasn't changed. But you know, the definition of what an American is has actually changed. The look is different. And I think the idea that I have to be sold to the all the ideals of the country are also different. And I think that you will decline as a nation once the brainwashing goes away.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure that we disagree more now than we did before, but we're certainly more polarized. Like the division is the place in the middle is bigger, where people want to reach across to sort of say, oh, I'll at least listen to you. Like we don't listen. Like people who are on the opposite sides of the political spectrum don't listen. They just name call and just point fingers, but there's no listening. There's no sort of coming to an agreement, whatever that agreement might look like. And so I think that's problematic. But I think that it gets sometimes we agree on the problem, but we don't agree how to fix it. So I think that some of the decline are things that are tethered together. So if you look at in the clip he was talking about, we're number one in the world in incarcerations, which is you think about it, we are number one in the world in incarcerations, both in the total number of people incarcerated and as the per capita number. It's over 2 million people in prison. 600 and something for every 10,000 people or something like that. It's a lot of people. And we keep people in prison longer as opposed to other places where their penal system is actually not just punitive. You get an education, you get a skill trade. So when you get out, you don't reoffend. It's not a cycle of going in and out. And our system of justice is sort of based on you do something, you go in, you come out, and you're right back in a short period because you don't have anything. You don't leave with anything that you didn't have when you came. You leave in the same condition you were when you got there. But the flip side is the educational system, where he was talking about where we were in math and science, where we used to be at least in the top 5. Now we're in the 40s and 50s, and those two things go together. If your education system is declining, then you're going to have more more incarcerations, and then it's going to just continue as a cycle. I mean, I don't know how you break that cycle without fixing the education piece, whether in the schools or in prisons.
Well, I mean, you don't fix it without it. I mean, I think in the end of the day, that's we may not agree on a lot of things, but I think there's an agreement that education is really going to be a key to change. I don't think that we're in agreement in terms of what that looks like, though. What education really, really looks like in America, and the ability to really, again, give that to everybody. Because of our other issues, we actually know what to do. We can't do it because we have these other polarizing issues, our own sense of discrimination, our own sense of entitlement that really keeps us from being able to give what we need to give, which is a much, much better, more well-rounded, and I think more equal educational system.
Yeah, I think when you look at other parts of the world, I think they just on a basic level take their education much more seriously. Like it's mandatory. You don't play with the schools. You don't have nonsense in the schools that we sort of have here. And I think it makes a big difference. If you look at the countries that have surpassed us, if you look at when America became a world leader, it was after World War II. Right. So Europe is devastated. Russia's devastated. China, Japan has 2 nuclear bombs dropped on them. And so out of that, the U.S. rises up, and we have all these. The United Nations was formed right after that. The International Monetary Fund, all these global organizations that tether the world together with the United States at the top, because we're the only ones really left with a real industrial complex. Like no one else has anything. Their infrastructure is destroyed. Their ability to produce stuff is destroyed. Their workforce is destroyed because they sent them to war and they all got, many of them got killed. We're really the last man standing. And, I want to give them credit to their credit. They did take advantage of that and built something that stood on top of, the world, so to speak. But at some point, all empires overreach. And when you overreach and you stretch yourself too thin, and that's when you begin to see the practical problems. And it's clear that the wars, Vietnam War, the wars in the Middle East, those were overextensions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And listen, this is textbook decline of empires. You know, if you look at all the Alexander the Great, one of the worst things that he did was he continued on to the east, right? He went into India and tried to continue on, and so that great overreach destroyed him. We are really in a decline that I don't think can be changed. I don't think, the idea of making America great again is an aspiration, but it's truly not, I don't believe it's going to happen, because if we look at the pattern of other empires, Babylonian Empire, it's all been overreach. Egypt, the Egyptian Empire, we just reached too far. And so we are in the same place that I think that England was in, where it reached too far and there was a time for another empire. We can only go but so far on the fact that everybody else was drained. So we actually fit into that small vacuum. After World War II, the world was in turmoil, but our shores had not been touched.
Not at all.
Other people had been bombed into submission. They had these great rebuilding programs, but Statue of Liberty was still there. DC was still standing. What the capital Spokane was still Spokane, Washington. So nothing had happened, and on Main Street here in America. So we did take advantage of it. We did take that leap and jump in terms of everything else, in cinema, in finances, and everything.
Yeah.
But I think that time is really ending simply because we are too divided to hold it together anymore.
That's interesting. So we have another comment. Let's see. Wait a minute. Hold on. Okay, Cleve said, agreed. However, I'm thinking, could we ever unite as Americans when we can allow a man to speak against everything about our government and democracy?
I'm assuming that man was Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of uniting, no, I don't think you can ever get that same thing. I think you can put it back together again. And I think the overreach has left us extremely vulnerable to other countries. China is much richer. Even countries like India, economically and technology-wise, are surpassing us in many ways in terms of advances in all sorts of things. So I think that in terms of that stuff is gone, and the world is much smaller. And because we've tethered ourselves to all these global entities, now when they say we're going to stop pumping oil, the price of oil goes up here. Like they have a substantial control over our economy. China owns just so much of like New York and other major cities. They have substantial control over a lot of things that happen in this country. So in some ways, even the uniting will help, because we've given up so much of our, I guess you call it sovereignty or control, for money and for other reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, if we united now, it would be cool. It just wouldn't help, but it would be great. It'd be a nice society. But I think, when in the areas that count in terms of real estate, in terms of real position and power in the world, in terms of the marketplace, we've given up way too much to really recover. I mean, China and Russia and many other countries would have to make such great fumbles of the ball in order for us to get it back. We're down by 4. And we would need them to make it just a huge faux pas in order for us to really get the ball back. And I think we're in a position where China and the rest of the world is actually covering the ball. They're just waiting for the clock to run out.
Well, and the reason why the clock won't run out is because the United States has tens of billions of dollars worth of purchasing power. So as long as that's the case, you'll always have a place somewhere in there where they're not going to say, we're just going to do something crazy like we want the bag. So we're going to keep doing what we're doing. We're not going to overreach in this regard, because we want to keep tapping into that purchasing power. So I don't think they're going to do anything that's like crazy.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Comment says, Chavez, how great can we really be if we are continuously owing China trillions of dollars? Doesn't this make them greater than us? I mean, it does in terms in that regard, right? And economically and all that kind of stuff. But the way that the propaganda machine works is where they're fat, they're communists, and they're this and they're that. So we try to downplay the economic part of it by saying with their governments, like they're dictators or whatever. which may be true, but that doesn't change the dynamic of the finances. That doesn't change the economics. The economics are the same regardless of the form of government they have. But that's sort of how it's played. Like that, you can ignore them. I mean, you ignore them at your own peril, because they built themselves from the ashes of World War II to be a substantial world power, quietly in some ways.
Nixon called them the sleeping giant, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they were known as a sleeping giant. So that giant now has awakened, and so the idea that I don't think there's any coming back now. Whether America's going to be knocked out of the out of the playing field, off the playing field totally, absolutely not. But I suspect that America's going to move in a position like Britain, like France, Germany, definitely having certain pockets that are going to be theirs, that they will actually maneuver. Germany with the with the banking power, but there's certain military power that they didn't necessarily have, right? By themselves,
Right.
So America's really going to be instead of leading the coalition, America's now going to become a part of the coalition, because you can see that the idea of a rubber stamp and the fact that our president says it, that no longer goes anymore. If the president calls, you pick up the phone. If the president wants a meeting, he gets a meeting.
Right.
We're seeing a president that doesn't get the phone call getting through, who doesn't get the meeting right away, and what he wants doesn't happen with people he's protecting. The Saudis have no real army other than the army we give them. They have no real air force other than no serious air force other than the support we give them, and yet they get to say, "Nah, we're not listening." with all your bombs and missiles out there, because we calling your bluff. Were you gonna blow us up?
No, apparently we're not. We just go over and fist bump them and keep it moving. They say no, and they said no, essentially, and sided with the other OPEC partners and oil producing companies, because in the end they looked out for their own interest, right? In the end, they said we're going to take care of ourselves, and we'll get back to you on some other stuff, but right now we're taking care of us. Just on another same conversation, but just something completely different. I've often, when you read like in Revelation, the United States seems to not be any factor at all in what's going on. And it seems like we're heading, because you can see how limited our influence is in that part of the world. Some of it's geography, and then some of it's just like our relationship with those countries. So what is your thinking about how the U.S. will fit into the end times in terms of what's going to happen between all these nations?
Well, I mean, America, as other countries, will have their part, in terms of the end times. Now, when you talk about apocalyptic, in terms of the real movements in even after the rapture, Antichrist time, I don't see America just in terms of what you see biblically. Doesn't seem like it's going to be a center. It doesn't seem like America is a place. And now, obviously, it wasn't thought of at the writing of the Bible, right? But surely it was known by God, right? So the idea that he would, he could have said that there was a place in the West that was going to, and he will come from, this place here. But I don't think America fits in that place. But just like many empires that have come into fruition, where it seems like they'd be the center of everything. No, they had their time. But that time has now run its course.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's running its course. We're not going to get it tomorrow, but it's running its course.
Yeah, I mean, Rome is still there. It just has no real influence outside of their close, neighbors and stuff. They have no real influence on the world stage.
Right.
So I mean, I could definitely see a place or a time where America is in that same place. We're still here. We're still America. We're still buying tens of billions worth of stuff, but we have less and less influence on the affairs of the world.
Right.
Which is going to be interesting, because I think we all grown up thinking that America would last forever. Like how could anyone ever take us down? How could we ever become anything less than what we are? But I think the cracks were there all along to see. And I think, now we're seeing it more clearly. I think I'm seeing it more clearly. I don't know who the we is, but you definitely can see more clearly how we're sort of in a declining place.
We are, and I think that before that decline happens, we are in a unique position where we really got to take advantage of the influence we have, even from an evangelistic standpoint. And speaking of that, we have this time now. The Rome had its time, where it was a center. Egypt had its time, where it was a center, and I suspect that Greece had that very same time where it was the center of everything, and so it used that time to get things out. And until it was no longer the center, until it was not the language that was spoken all over the world. We are really in that very same space where, okay, we still have the biggest voice. And I think we're in that same spot. We've got to take this time to get as much out until our time goes away. Because what country and where, we don't really know, but we may not be the center. And I suspect we won't.
Yeah, that'd be interesting time. So we have another comment. Chavez says nothing more than a tourist attraction. I think that's somewhat true now, where people come here to see stuff. But I think that a lot of people can see sort of the waning influence worldwide that the United States has, and sort of the waning influence and sort of how people view us, and how other countries who are coming to prominence are sort of got, like China and Russia coming together, and other countries coming together, form their own alliances to sort of influence things on the world stage. So we don't have any natural partners. We don't have anybody that would be a natural partner for us to sort of build a coalition with, and sort of to have influence on the world stage. I mean, it's not Canada. I mean, or Mexico. I mean, there's nothing really.
Right. Well, we've been trying to stand alone for the longest time, and so that one of the downfalls of that kind of isolation, even though it seemed like we were not, bring us your tide, you're poor. But the truth of the matter is, we've been walking in an isolationist policies for the longest time. Even though we've been seen like the police of the world, we've thrown troops out there. But in truth, Americans have pretty much stayed insular. And I think that, we missed what the world was doing. We kind of missed that other people had democracies. We missed that there were other great things that were going on in Singapore and in other countries outside of our shores. So that ignorance really kind of opened the door for people to kind of creep in. And because they didn't look like us, we thought they were no threat to us economically. They were no threat to us in other ways. And they silently took over.
Yeah. So to those points, so you do have sort of a balance where you have the need to take care of home, but also to some outreach of some sort without overreaching. But should we have been more nationalist? I mean, instead of all these things that we're doing, all these adventures in other parts of the world, should we have been? I mean, I know that Trump's not popular and nationalism isn't a popular thing to say, but would that have been helpful in any way?
Absolutely. I mean, again, the overreach being really the biggest downfall of every empire, right? Trying to be the police of the world. Unfortunately, that costs money. I mean, the idea that you don't have anybody to handle the hurricane or the earthquake over there, so that's our job. So every humanitarian, we get to a point as Americans where we look and we see something happen in Madagascar, and we say, why aren't we there? Like, why are they handling that on their own? Right. And then there's another earthquake in Peru, and we say, what's America doing? And we've gotten to the point where we kind of think, hey, everything is our position. And sure, we really should have been a lot more nationalistic. Instead of just waving the flag, we really should have been taking care and shoring up our own so that we wouldn't be eaten up really secretly from the inside out by China, by other governments that were buying up property and buying up power positions without us really noticing it.
Yeah, it definitely was inside out, and some of it is self-inflicted. I mean, we damaged our own educational systems. We set up our own criminal justice system, which devastates communities. So we did that, and that's growing out a large part of this country in terms of the workforce, people who can contribute to society, and just the money. Like, the U.S. spend so much money on locking people up that could be spent on other things, including obviously education. And people are always crying poor mouth when it comes to education, yet we have all this money for all this other stuff. So
building prisons
is not a priority, not the way we say it is.
Absolutely.
And
100% agree.
I think we look at, although it didn't help them in the end, and we're just about out of time, I think other empires paid more attention. They valued education and thought and thinking more. Didn't stop them from overreach, but they still, to a certain extent, their educational systems remained intact even while they were overreaching because they valued them. I think that we have ceased to value those things, and we're going to decline in a different way than they did.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and so we will see. But no, great conversation. Thanks to everyone who joined in, who watched and popped on. There's a comment before we go. We'll see. Chavez says, we will supply the resources to those that will inevitably destroy us.
Well said.
Yeah, well said. And we're going to end on that. Again, thanks to everyone who joined in. Like our content, share with your friends. Facebook, you go to our Facebook page or YouTube page. You can subscribe, share, like, all that kind of good stuff on either of those platforms. We're on Twitter and Instagram. You can go there as well and find us and share our content. We certainly appreciate you watching, and we will see you back here next week at 7 o'clock. Thanks again. Good night, and God bless.
God bless. Have a good one.